Hello there, and thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is John Hathaway, and this is episode 7 in my Unmasking Religion series, where I try to help you with removing that spiritual mask and getting rid of the self-righteous facade that so many of us who grew up in fundamentalist Christianity were taught to wear, to put on so that we appear better than your average sinner. And I want to try to help you guys to uncover your authentic self, to be who God has called you to be without being ashamed about it, and just trying to navigate through this time of spiritual uncertainty. So, like I said, this is episode 7. We're going to be talking about double standards in this episode. And if you haven't watched any of the previous episodes, I would encourage you to go back and watch episodes 1 through 6 of this Unmasking Religion series. If you grew up in fundamentalist Christianity, and if you're starting to outgrow that, or if you're starting to feel stuck, or just like you're not getting anywhere with it, you're not being spiritually fed, you're not growing, then this is the series for you. And I do want to give a trigger warning to those of you who are in fundamentalism, but if you if you're not open to new ideas and not open to new ways of thinking, if you're attached to the way that you've always done things, and you don't want to consider like that maybe your standards are not the best standards for everyone else, or that maybe just whatever standards you've adopted for yourself, they might not be necessary for everyone else to have. So if you don't hold that view, or if you're not open to the consideration that that you might not have the ultimate authority on standards, or that that whatever standards were given to you were the exact right ones, then this video is probably not for you to watch. So that's your trigger warning. We are on a spiritual journey together, and I don't subscribe to any particular brand of Christianity, any denomination, or any creed, or anything like that. We're just doing our own thing, trying to grow and explore in our spiritual journey. And you are welcome to join if you are inclined to do so. So, like I said, we're talking about double standards in this episode. Now, if you don't know what a double standard is, we're talking first. I should probably explain to you what standards are. So standards are essentially like rules or guidelines that that we follow. And as Christians, like many of the fundamentalist groups that I was a part of, like in the independent fundamental Baptist churches, they had these different standards, like you weren't allowed to go to movie theaters, you weren't allowed to go mixed bathing, like where men and women are swimming together in a public setting or anything like that, and you're not allowed to like go to parties or hang out with people who drink and smoke and cuss and all the different things like that. Women were not allowed to wear pants, and you can't listen to secular music, or you have to just listen to like Christian music or classical music, instrumental music, things like that. So those are essentially what standards are. Now, a double standard is when you have a standard, like you have one of those rules in place, and maybe you have it for yourself, maybe you also try to enforce it on others, other Christians or family members or whatever you have. But if you have that standard, and then you in turn you do something else that essentially is like you're breaking your own rule, but because of a technicality you're not doing it the exact same way that your standard says not to do it, then it's okay. Like, for example, I know of several independent fundamental Baptists and other Christians that are opposed to going to movie theaters because of, apparently it gives the appearance of evil, that like you might be going in there and you might be going out there just to make out with your boyfriend and girlfriend, or you might be going to see some rated R movie. But then at the same time, those same Christians would be okay with you going to like the Red Box at Walmart, if they even have those anymore. I think a lot of places are getting rid of them now. Or you just, buy a movie somewhere, rent a movie, stream it online, whatever. As long as you're watching it from home, then it's okay. And it can be the same rated R movie, but they just don't want you to. If it's like some movie that's inappropriate rated R, then don't disclose it to anybody. Just keep it to yourself. So that's a double standard. Is if you're not allowing someone to do something in one sense, but in another sense, it is allowed because of a technicality, even though there's no realistic functional difference. It's just because of a particular setting. So we're going to be talking about that. Now, I gave the example of like the movie theater and the movies, but there's some deeper subjects that I want to talk about in regards to double standards. The first one that I'm probably going to spend, hold on just a second. I'm just going to take those off because I feel like my glasses are a little bit foggy, so we're just going to try to do this. It's a little bright out there, so give myself some shade here. So the first one I want to talk about is the whole secular music thing. In the independent fundamental Baptist movement, most of the churches that I've been a part of when I was in that movement, the religious authority, those that were like pastors or religious leaders or any kind of like staff position, leader, deacon, or just mentors that you would look up to, would essentially tell you that it's wrong to listen to secular music. But there are some caveats that they would that were acceptable. Like you could listen to classical music, or maybe you could listen to instrumental like soundtrack music, like for Star Wars or Lord of the Rings or something like that. And they would even sometimes allow, like if you watched movies like Disney movies like Moana or Frozen or whatever, Lion King, and I've known several people like in Bible college that they would have all these they would either have like CDs that maybe they burned their own CDs through MP3s online, or they just downloaded the music directly from online, but they would listen to these songs from these Disney movies like it was completely normal, and no one batted an eye, no one got in trouble or anything. But if you were to ever like try to listen to like an AC/DC song or a Maroon 5 song or Coldplay or the Eagles or you name it, if you were to listen to any normal secular band that like has instruments and lyrics and things like that, then you would get in trouble, and they would say like, throw that CD away, don't listen to that music, that's wicked, that's of the world, that's worldly. But essentially there's not really much of a difference. I mean, and I've asked like 3 or 4 different people that I've asked some of my fellow students in Bible college, and I think I may have asked one of the leaders there too, like one of the deacons or assistant pastors or something. I think I've asked a couple of them, why is it that we have such a problem with listening to secular music? And nobody could give me a straight answer. They would give me vague answers like, oh well, because, and I don't know, maybe you can tell me the reference for this, where they get this idea, but they say, well, Satan was the song leader, the choir director in heaven, and because the world, because Satan is the leader, the prince and the power of the air of this world, and he is in charge of the music of this world. Well, we have to be extremely careful with music, that we only listen to music that glorifies God, and that's talking about God and Jesus and the gospel and all that stuff. And if it doesn't have anything to do with that, then it's evil. But like I said, they would have these exceptions, like when it came to classical music that had nothing to do with Jesus, or Star Wars soundtrack music, or songs from Moana or Frozen or Aladdin or whatever. And just because it was from like this kids movie, like, okay, well, we'll let that slide. And then probably the biggest hypocrisy is whenever it was Christmas season, you would have these radio stations that would, throughout the year, they would play normal secular music, hit music or whatever, and then for like 1 month out of the year, they would be playing Christmas music. And it wasn't like all Christian Christmas music, it was like secular Christmas music, like Michael Bublé, Perry Como, Bing Crosby, and then even some more modern ones like the Jonas Brothers or Ariana Grande, and all these different people that have their own version of different Christmas songs. And some of them were just like worldly, like they didn't have anything to do with the gospel or Jesus or anything, but just because it fell under the umbrella of Christmas, somehow that makes it okay for Christians to listen to, which just made absolutely zero sense to me. So in case you haven't guessed it by now, I pretty much don't I don't subscribe to the whole idea of like Christians shouldn't listen to secular music. If you can allow it for if you can make an exception to a rule, then there is no rule. But yeah, that's such a major double standard. If you're going to have a rule in place that says like you can't listen to any secular music, then just do it across the board. Like don't make any exceptions for Disney movies. Like I will respect you 100% if you make that decision to not listen to secular music, but if you're going to say that you're going to do that, be fully committed. Don't listen to Beethoven. Throw out your Bing Crosby records and your CDs from Aladdin or whatever these other Disney movies are and their soundtracks, Mary Poppins. Throw those all out the window, burn them, whatever you want to do, and just listen to your Christian Southern gospel music or bluegrass or whatever it is, because you're committing a double standard, and you're worse than just people that are just going to be listening. I mean, I would say it's worse for you to do that, to have the double standard, than it is for you to just straight up listen to like death metal music or something like that and be unashamed. At least you're being authentic if you're listening to this gangster rap and death metal music, and you don't try to hide the fact that you listen to it, rather than saying, oh yeah, I don't listen to any secular music, I only listen to Christian music, but then secretly you listen to some Beethoven music, some Mozart and Star Wars soundtracks, and every now and then you slip in a soundtrack from a different movie that has lyrics in it, like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, ooh, we're being a little bit wild today, we're going to listen to some of the Jackson 5 songs. It's just so stupid. Okay, so we're done talking about music. Let's get into some of the other subjects. Let's talk about cussing. All right, I'm gonna try to not like say any cuss words in this video. So just in case there's any young ones watching or anything like that, I'm gonna try my best to not say any of these words in an offensive way that would cause be a stumbling block for anyone. But cussing, like the whole rule of cussing, the way that we look at it in 21st century Western Christianity, basically that whole concept wasn't even like thought of. It wasn't even really a thought in Scripture. Whenever, like, we take these verses in the Bible, like Ephesians 4:29, where it says, like, let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. So we take verses like that, and then we turn it into basically you can't like let any dirty words come out of your mouth. And that has nothing to do with what Paul was talking about in the I think it was in Ephesians. That had nothing to do with what he was talking about. corrupt communication there, he's talking about anything that like tears people down. It can be like gossip, slander, lying, being deceitful, being boastful, anything that has like a negative impact on somebody, or that's like lifting yourself up while bringing someone else down, things like that. That is corrupt communication. They weren't talking about saying certain dirty words or things like that. That wasn't even really much of a thought back then. But in case you like still don't agree with me, well, let's just think practically here. So we say that there's certain words that we can't use because of culture has dictated that they're inappropriate. Like there's the F-bomb, for example. You don't want to say that as a Christian, but it's completely fine. Well, at least for some Christians, it's completely fine to say screw or frick or freaking or whatever. And those are all different variations of the F-bomb that we have just cleaned up a little bit. We've changed it up, changed some of the pronunciation, so now it's not a cuss word, but it still is a cuss word. It's a Christian cuss word, quote unquote Christian cuss word. Same with like a variation of the word for excrement. Like a lot of Christians will say poop or crap or dung or manure, but you can't say sugar honey iced tea because that somehow, just because it's been deemed culturally inappropriate, now it's wrong. Now, I'm not advocating for you to just go out and cuss everybody out and things like that. I think that cussing can be a form of corrupt communication. If you're like cussing somebody out, you're using it to tear somebody down. But if you stub your toe and you mention the Hoover Dam while you're stubbing your toe, I don't think God's going to be upset at you for doing that. I don't think that dropping the F-bomb because you just wrecked and you got into a wreck and you totaled your car. I don't think that you've sinned or you've committed a felony against God or something like that, where he's going to take away some brownie points from you in heaven because you said the F-bomb. That's just ridiculousness. But I mean, like, there's basically for every cuss word that the world has deemed inappropriate, or that Christians have deemed inappropriate, well, Christianity has their own version of that same word that has the exact same meaning, but just because we've changed it up a little bit, we've cleaned it up a little bit, it's okay for us to say. And to me, that is one of the biggest double standards that you can have. Either don't say any of these Christian cuss words, don't even say anything that would remotely resemble anything. Like, don't ever talk about poop or excrement or anything. Just be a completely clean, like, don't ever talk about any kind of bodily fluids or anything remotely like sexual or anything like that, because if you want to be like the most completely clean, self-righteous, squeaky clean double or goody two shoes, then fine, be that way, but don't but if you're going to do it to the fullest, do it to the max, give maximum effort, as Deadpool would say, and stop trying to act like you are this holy person when you are using all these Christian cuss words, and you call other people out, or you act so offended and roll your eyes when you hear the F word on TV, or when you hear some homeless person cussing at someone else, or cussing to themselves, talking to themselves, or something like that. You just need to grow up. So yeah, that's the second one. This third one, and in case it hasn't already been controversial enough, we're going to amp it up a little bit with each one of these. So this one's going to be even slightly more controversial. We're talking about the double standard of drinking alcohol. So I am not going to say that you should go and drink. I'm not going to tell you that you should go and get drunk. There are clear warnings in Scripture about getting drunk and the problems that come with it. But how do I put this? There's nowhere in Scripture that gives you a blanket rule that says you can never taste a sip of alcohol. You can never have a glass of wine. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, Paul even told Timothy, have a little wine for your stomach's sake. And yeah, I already know there's going to be Christians out there that are going to say, well, he was talking about grape juice. Oh, and and then there's the classic, Jesus turning water into wine. Like, oh no, he didn't turn it into wine. It was unfermented grape juice. And they just didn't have another word for it back then, so it was all called wine. Well, no, obviously, if you're gonna make grape juice the way that you do today, it's a very big process, and like you wouldn't be able to. You would basically have to like have those grapes pressed on the exact same day, and they would have to like all of it would have to be made on the same day because they didn't have refrigeration to be able to like keep it from fermenting. They didn't have all the preservatives and the things like that we have today, where we can buy like store-bought grape juice off the shelf at Walmart that's not even refrigerated, but it still keeps its integrity and doesn't ferment because of all these different preservatives and things that we have. They didn't have any of that back then, and it's just ridiculous to the mental acrobats that it takes for people to try to redefine things in Scripture, like say, well, it wasn't wine, it was grape juice. Like, just get over yourselves. Take it for what it is. Now, I heard someone say, well, when Jesus turned the water into wine, it was new wine that he turned it into, which was unfermented, or like less. It wasn't like as fermented as regular wine, and you couldn't get drunk off of new wine. Well, newsflash, you could get drunk off of new wine, or else some of these people in the Bible had absolutely no idea what they were talking about. In Acts 2, when Peter was talking, like during the day of Pentecost when he was preaching, and and then all these other disciples and things were talking, and they were preaching where everyone could hear them in their own language, and like just mesmerizing these crowds of people because everyone could hear them in their own language, and there was like people from several different nations traveling in to hear them, and it just mesmerized so many people. But then there were these skeptics out there who were saying, oh, these people, they're just drunk with new wine. Well, if you couldn't get drunk with new wine, why would they say they are drunk with new wine? Just think about your arguments. I mean, anyway, but what I'm going to get at with this whole drinking thing. So, like I said, I'm not advocating for you to go out and buy a 6-pack of alcohol or have a glass of wine tonight. If you've never drunk before, if that's a stumbling block for you, definitely just keep doing what you're doing. Don't drink alcohol. Whatever. I mean, if you feel like it's a sin for you, then don't do it. But the problem is that so many of these Christians who have been told their whole lives that drinking is a sin, you can't go out and have a glass of wine on a date or whatever, those same people will like sometimes go through a whole 12-pack of Coke within like 2 days. And I used to do that myself too. I could probably down 3 or 4 Dr. Peppers in a single day, probably more than that. And that is probably like 10 times worse for your body in the long run than having like 1 glass of wine a week, or 1 bottle of beer a week, or something like that. The damage that it causes, I mean, that's why we have so much like heart failure and heart disease going around, and diabetes, and like people are dying in like their 40s and 50s because they're consuming so much sugar and processed foods, and like McDonald's fries and burgers and just all this kind of stuff Doritos, Kit Kats, and I'm preaching to myself here because I've definitely took part in that for probably the majority of my life. I'm trying to clean it up now a little bit, trying to watch what I eat, be more conscious, and like drink more water and things like that. But that's probably had like a way worse impact in my life doing that than if I were to have like a couple beers a week or something like that, which I really don't like drinking beer. To me it tastes bad, but that's besides the point. So yeah, drinking, if you think drinking is not okay, you think drinking is not okay, but you think gluttony and drinking as much sodas and all these processed foods and being obese and all that, if you think that that's fine for a Christian, but that drinking one sip of alcohol is a complete sin, you are way off mark. You've missed the whole point of like the warnings in Scripture that talk about the dangers of alcohol and stuff like that. Anyway, we're going to go on to the last one. This one is probably going to get a little bit touchy, but we're going to be talking about purity culture. Now, there's a podcast out there called the Preacher Boys podcast, hosted by Eric Skwarczynski. And in this podcast, Eric covers a bunch of issues. Like, he covers these, talks about these scandals and interviews different people that were involved, like victims and survivors that were involved in these scandals in like independent fundamental Baptist churches where they were abused, or where they witnessed abuse from church leaders and stuff like that. And well, in this podcast, one of the things that Eric says is he says that purity culture equals rape culture. And honestly, that is so true. I can't say that that's not true, because, and I've seen like the ramifications of this purity culture, what it does, and I know the intentions behind it are good, but what it actually does is it causes so much more harm, and it basically causes the effect that it's trying to stop. It actually tends to bolster that, and it tends to strengthen that. For example, so there's this concept called salience landscaping. I think maybe the cognitive scientist John Vervaeke might have came up with that term, or he's at least brought it to light a lot in recent times. He talks about that quite a bit. And what salience landscaping is, it's when you bring something to the forefront of your mind. Like if I'm driving, probably the buildings on off to my right or left, or like the mountains, or the rivers on the side of the road and stuff like that, or if there's like a turtle in a puddle in the ditch on the side of the road, that's not going to be in my salience landscape if I'm focusing on the road. What I'm going to be focused on is the cars in front of me, the road in front of me, maybe a billboard here and there, or certain landmarks if I'm trying to get to a particular destination. But these other things aren't going to be on my salience landscape. But say like if I'm I used to have a certain kind of vehicle. It was a not a Kia Optima. That's what I'm driving right now, my wife's car. But I used to have a Kia Seltos, which is a small SUV. And when I bought that, I bought one brand new a few years ago. We wound up selling it. But after I bought that, I would start seeing those Kia Seltoses everywhere. And before I bought it, I didn't even know what a Kia Seltos was. But someone recommended it to me whenever I was looking at some different cars. And then after I bought it, I started to see them everywhere. And that's because it was brought to my salience landscape. And the same thing happens in purity culture. We tell like these men, like, hey, you need to stop lusting after women, and preach on women about, you girls, you need to dress more modestly, and stop showing off your body, stop wearing skin tight jeans, and you need to not wear mini skirts, but wear like a long flowing dress that like doesn't reveal the curvature of your body and stuff like that, because it causes mental lust. And when guys hear that, and when they preach that, and when they hear that preaching, they think, okay, yeah, I'm gonna try to avoid like lusting after women. But what it does is it causes you, hearing all that preaching time after time, it causes you to look for that subconsciously. You're not looking for it consciously, but subconsciously, you see a woman at the beach wearing a bikini, and you're like, oh, well, I better look away. And then but you catch yourself, every now and then you glance, and then you try to like make sure no one was noticing you looking. And I've noticed that like I think that kind of culture had a negative impact in my own life, where it started like changing the way I was looking at women, and like and I'm starting to grow past that. I'm starting to grow away from that mindset. But like, it's hard to like, you're bolstering that impulse in guys to like look at the way women are dressed and like, oh, she's dressed provocatively, that's wicked, and stuff like that. And when you do that and you put that in someone's salience landscape, well, what do you expect them to do? Their mind's gonna be filled with like sexual lust and desire. And that's going to cause these guys to do these unspeakable crimes. And you hear of all these stories of pastors and like youth pastors and different spiritual leaders in churches that victimize these young women, these young girls and stuff like that, often underage, and they take advantage of them, and they do it through a manipulative way where they first of all, like they don't admit fault on their own, but like once they do it, they tell the girls, well, if someone were to find out about this, like your character would be diminished. If they find out that you were sleeping with me, then no guy is ever going to want to be with you again, but we'll just keep this our little secret. And that's what purity culture does, is it makes these girls like they think that they're like this worthless piece of garbage because somebody raped them, because they lost their virginity to a predator, and now no one's ever going to want to love them again. And that is absolutely like the worst form of lie that anyone has ever conceived of. Like, that's just terrible. And if you've ever been told that, and if you've ever believed that, I'm very sorry. But no, listen, you're gonna, if something like that happened to you, that doesn't take away any of your worth. That doesn't make you any less attractive or any less appealing or anything like that. You're still gonna find love if that's what you want, and God still loves you. Nothing's changed about, I'm not saying that nothing's changed. Like, I know it's impactful and it hurts, but the only people that are going to view you as less than is these religious hypocrites and Pharisees and fundamentalists that have these perverted brains and mindsets. So, yeah. Now, listen, I just want to give you a word of encouragement for those of you who maybe are having a hard time with the subject of this video. If you look at Romans 14, I'm not going to read it, but I would just encourage you to read Romans 14, where Paul talks about people having their own particular convictions and standards and things like that. Like, some people say it's okay to eat meat while others don't, and some people say that you have to worship on the Sabbath while others might worship on a different day. And basically the idea is that just be who you are, be authentic. Don't try to change. If something is like not causing harm to you or to someone else, you don't have to try to enforce all of your beliefs on everybody else. It's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Let people be who they are. Don't require them to adhere to all the same rules as you do just because you have a weakness and you have a stumbling block that you have a hard time getting past. Don't make everybody else be subject to those rules for that reason. So yeah, read Romans 14. Maybe that'll give you a better perspective on this issue. If you need like a Bible passage that will kind of get you to see what I'm trying to say in this video. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and leave the video at that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you do enjoy the content you get here, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Make sure you hit that bell notification so you don't miss any future content. And I will see you next time. Have a good day.